the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And Jesus said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." All authority. In the second reading today, in Paul's letter to the Ephesians, we hear that authority spelled out in detail. Christ rules over all forces, authorities, powers, and rulers. He rules over all other beings in this world and will rule in the future world as well. God has put all things under Christ's power. So when Jesus speaks with authority, he speaks with power, a power that commands us, "Go, make disciples of all nations." In the Acts of the Apostles, just before Jesus was lifted up and the cloud took him out of their sight, he said to the apostles, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you." Now, in the Greek New Testament, there are about 4 different words that can be used for power. The word that Jesus uses for the power of the Holy Spirit is dunamis, from which we get our word dynamite. Another word for power in the New Testament is energia. You'll recognize the hints of the English word energy in this word. Let me imagine some different images of power. 4 people in a room. First, a powerful dictator who rules a country. His word commands armies, and his shifting moods intimidate subordinates. We might call him an autocrat, which comes from the Greek word kratos, which describes a brutal or dominating power. Next to him, a gifted athlete at the peak of his physical prowess, a man whose quickness and strength have few equals. His skills are graceful power, for which he is much admired and envied. He has energia, that power of dynamic energy. The third person is a rock star whose music and charisma can electrify an audience and fill a room with a soulful energy. Her face is on billboards. She's a household name. She is dynamite. Finally, we have in the room a newborn, a baby, lying in her crib, seemingly without any power, no strength whatsoever. She's unable to even ask for what she needs. When the Gospels speak of Jesus as having great power, they do not use words autocratic or energetic or dynamic. They use a 4th word, exousia, which is maybe best rendered as vulnerability. Jesus' real power was rooted in a certain vulnerability, like the powerlessness of a child. Babies can overpower us precisely by their powerlessness. Around a baby, most every mother and father has learned not only to watch their language, but also try not to have bitter arguments. We try to be better, more loving persons. A baby has a power to draw us out of ourselves and our self-centeredness. That's the way that Jesus was deemed powerful during his lifetime. Jesus was born a baby, powerless, and he died hanging helplessly on a cross, with bystanders mocking his powerlessness. And yet both his birth and his death manifest the kind of power on which we can ultimately build our lives. In the Great Commission scene, which ends Matthew's Gospel, we notice right away there's something wrong. Right at the beginning of the verse, we heard the 11 disciples went to Galilee. Wait a minute. Aren't there supposed to be 12? There's one missing. Yes, Judas, one of the 12, not only betrayed Jesus, but afterwards went out and in Matthew's Gospel hanged himself. So the disciples are incomplete because of betrayal and suicide. The 11 disciples that do arrive in Galilee are described with another characteristic. When they saw him, They worshipped him, but some doubted. Actually, in the Greek text, there is no some before the word doubted. So the text more accurately reads, they worshipped and doubted. Isn't that more likely how we experience faith, both with faith and doubt? So how is it possible that this incomplete and doubting group of disciples is going to spread the gospel to the ends of the earth? The Great Commission, go, make disciples of all nations, is given to all 11, both believers and doubters. And Jesus is commissioning these vulnerable and powerless disciples because we can only do the work of God's kingdom in God's power. As St. Paul said in his second letter to the Corinthians, we have this treasure in clay jars so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. For power is made perfect in weakness. What is true for the disciples is true for us. We love our families, even if sometimes we do not love them as well as we could. And when the love that we give is not always reciprocated. We guide our children, even as our patience runs thin, and the advice we offer is sometimes rejected. We're called to show by our lives that God is real, even though our lives are sometimes marked by selfishness and fear. We proclaim with our words that God's love is present, even though at times our words do not match our actions. But we do not go empty-handed. We have this promise from Jesus, behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age. And we heard this before in Matthew's Gospel. The last Sunday of Advent, behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. So Matthew's Gospel begins and ends with this promise. God is with us always. So we are not afraid to go.